You won't believe what had been happening behind the scenes of Marvin Sapp's life. While the world clapped for his chart-topping gospel hits and powerful sermons, very few knew about the silent storms he was fighting at home. Marvin Sapp, the man whose voice gave people strength, was carrying a burden that could have broken anyone. He rose to fame in the 1990s with the gospel group Commissioned, and his solo career took off soon after. His song Perfect Peace gave him recognition, but it was Never Would Have Made It that became his anthem of survival. People sang that song during their hardest times, but what they didn't know was that Sapp wrote it from the depth of his own pain. Let me tell you, that hit came from heartbreak, not just musical talent. This is how it all started. Marvin wasn't just singing to impress the charts. He was singing to survive. Fame followed him, awards followed him, but tragedy did too. In 2010, everything changed. His wife, Dr. Melinda Sapp, passed away after a fight with colon cancer. She was just 43. This wasn't just the death of a partner. It was the loss of his best friend, his ministry partner, and the mother of his 3 children. The couple had been leading the Lighthouse Full Life Center Church together, building a future for their family and their faith community. But here is the shocking part. All of that crumbled overnight. One diagnosis turned their perfect world upside down. Melinda didn't just support Marvin's music career, she managed it. She wasn't behind him, she was beside him. They shared the same mission, prayed the same prayers, and raised 3 beautiful children together. So when she passed away, Marvin wasn't just left alone emotionally, he was left alone in every way. He had to become both mother and father, pastor and parent, artist and counselor, and while the world saw him smile on stage, at home, he was learning how to braid his daughter's hair, pack lunchboxes, and dry tears, his kids and his own. This is where it gets interesting. Most people, after such a painful loss, might step away from the spotlight, but Marvin didn't. He stepped deeper into his purpose. He turned his pain into praise. He accepted the role of senior pastor at the Chosen Vessel Church in Fort Worth, Texas in 2019. That move was more than just a new position. It was a restart, but don't think that life got easier. Even while preaching hope, Marvin was still healing. Behind closed doors, the weight of single parenting crushed him at times. He once admitted in a 2017 interview that being a single parent was the hardest thing he ever did, and yet he did it with grace. What makes this story different? It's not just about a gospel star facing tragedy. It's about a father who said no to fame when his kids needed him. Marvin dated over the years. Yes, that's true, but he never allowed any relationship to distract him from his children. He said it clearly. They needed their dad and their dad's full attention. That's the kind of love that doesn't make headlines, but it should. He turned down opportunities, delayed his personal happiness, and put his own desires aside. Why? Because his children came first. And now those same children, Mikala, Madison, and Marvin II, have grown into strong, independent young adults. They made it, just like he did. But the craziest part, even with all his responsibilities, whispers started flying. Whispers about Marvin possibly finding love again. People began talking about him and Imani Showalter, the former star of Basketball Wives. Though he never confirmed the relationship, the rumors refused to die. The church world buzzed. The media speculated. Fans were divided. Was Marvin really ready to move on? Or was this just another distraction for a man still healing? That's the question that kept everyone guessing. The rumors didn't come out of nowhere. Marvin Sapp had always been private about his personal life, but sometimes silence speaks louder than words. In 2022, when whispers about him and Imani Showalter started getting louder, fans couldn't ignore it anymore. Imani, known for her time on Basketball Wives and her past engagement to NBA star Steven Jackson, was no stranger to the spotlight herself. The two were spotted at a few events together, and though there was no official confirmation, their chemistry didn't go unnoticed. Let me tell you, this pairing wasn't just surprising, it was controversial. People were divided. Some cheered Marvin on, saying he deserved happiness after more than a decade of grief. Others weren't so kind. They questioned if a pastor, especially one as respected as Marvin, should be linked to someone from reality TV. But here is the shocking part. Marvin never tried to defend or explain himself. He stayed silent, letting people say what they wanted, and that silence only added fuel to the fire. Church folks whispered, social media speculated, blogs wrote stories without facts. But Marvin, he kept preaching, he kept singing, he kept showing up for his kids and his congregation like nothing happened. This is where it gets interesting. While people focused on who Marvin might be dating, they missed what was happening in his heart. In that same 2017 interview, long before the rumors even started, Marvin had already said he was open to finding love again. He said it plainly. Totally. He admitted he had dated in the past, but made it clear his priority was his children. Now that they were grown and in college, he was finally giving himself permission to consider a future with someone new. But what makes this story different? Marvin wasn't chasing love. He was waiting for it, patiently, prayerfully, and privately. Behind the scenes, life was still testing him. Being a public figure in the church world is no easy task. Every move, every decision, every photo was examined under a microscope. Even when he wasn't doing anything wrong, judgment followed him like a shadow. Yet Marvin refused to play the victim. He stayed focused on his mission. At the Chosen Vessel Church in Texas and the Lighthouse Church in Michigan, he continued to guide people through their own storms, while still weathering his own. That's the kind of strength that doesn't come from fame, it comes from faith. But here's the craziest part. While people thought Marvin Sapp was slipping into romance, he was actually rising into something deeper, a new chapter of healing. Dating was never his priority. Peace was. And for the first time in years, he began to feel it. His children were settled, his ministry was thriving, and his heart, it was slowly opening again. Not just to the idea of love, but to the idea of living without guilt, without fear, without needing to explain himself. Destiny took an unexpected turn. While fans debated who Marvin might be with, they missed the bigger story. A man who gave everything to his family, finally beginning to reclaim something for himself. He wasn't rushing into love. He wasn't proving anything to anyone. He was just ready for whatever God had next. By the time Marvin Sapp began entertaining the idea of love again, most people assumed his story was settling down. But let me tell you, it was just getting started. While his music continued to dominate gospel charts and his sermons packed churches, Marvin's personal life remained under a quiet spotlight. He wasn't just a man of God. He had become a symbol of perseverance. But here is the shocking part. Behind that calm, composed public image was a man still wrestling with loneliness. Imagine this. A house once filled with the laughter of children now stood mostly silent. Mikala, Madison, and Marvin II had all moved on with their lives, chasing their own dreams, leaving Marvin with what he had sacrificed so much to give them, a solid foundation. But now, with his parenting mission mostly fulfilled, Marvin had to face something he hadn't faced in years, himself. No more late-night feedings, school events, or college visits. The noise of family life had faded. And sometimes, silence can be the loudest sound of all. This is where it gets interesting. People think healing comes with time, but Marvin knew better. Healing takes truth. And his truth was, he had built a life around everyone else's needs, and now he had to learn how to live for himself again. That's not easy, especially for a man used to serving others. Marvin found himself praying differently, not just for strength, but for companionship, for understanding, for someone who could love him not as Pastor Sapp, not as gospel star Marvin, but as the man who had endured more loss than most could imagine and still kept going. What makes this story different? Marvin didn't use fame as a distraction. He used it as a tool. His music became therapy for him and for millions of others. Songs like Never Would Have Made It hit differently when you knew the story behind them. They weren't just lyrics, they were confessions, survival stories, and even as rumors of new relationships popped up, Marvin never chased headlines. He let God write the next chapter. But the craziest part, even with everything he had been through, there were still people waiting for him to fail. Some church leaders whispered about his choices, some fans judged his silence. Some critics said he shouldn't be dating at all, that he should remain alone as a model of mourning, as if grief had a deadline, as if love wasn't allowed a second chance. But Marvin never answered his critics. He stayed focused, and slowly those whispers began to fade because his life kept speaking louder than any rumor ever could. Destiny took an unexpected turn, not in the form of scandal, but in the form of peace. Marvin Sapp wasn't trying to rebuild the past. He was trying to honor it. He carried Melinda's memory, not as a wound, but as a lesson. She had taught him love. She had taught him family. And now, as he stepped into a new season of life, he wasn't replacing her. He was honoring her by choosing joy again, quietly, carefully, faithfully. As Marvin Sapp embraced this new chapter, something powerful began to happen, not just in his personal life, but in the way people saw him. He was no longer just the man who sang through his pain. He became the man who lived beyond it. But here is the shocking part. While the world assumed he had already moved on, Marvin was still learning how to give himself permission to be happy again. It had been more than a decade since he lost Melinda, but grief doesn't leave just because the calendar changes. Let me tell you, people often believe that once someone finds success or fame, they have everything. But Marvin proved that success doesn't cancel out sorrow. He had to learn how to laugh without guilt, how to open up without fear, and how to love without feeling like he was betraying the past. That's a journey most people never talk about. But Marvin lived it every single day. His sermons grew deeper. His songs carried even more soul. And in quiet corners of his heart, healing was finally happening. This is where it gets interesting. Some fans kept asking, when will he remarry? Is he with Imani or not? But the truth was deeper than any headline. Marvin wasn't chasing a wedding ring. He was building wholeness. Whether or not Imani was the one didn't matter as much as the fact that Marvin had finally reached a place where he could consider love again. That was the real victory. Not gossip, not paparazzi shots, but the quiet decision to live again. What makes this story different? Marvin never let tragedy define him. He let it refine him. He didn't become bitter. He became better. And through it all, he stayed real. No public stunts, no fake relationships for the camera, just a man doing what he always did, serving God, loving his children, and showing up even when it hurt. His life wasn't a perfect fairy tale. It was raw, painful, and honest. And that's why it inspired so many. But the craziest part, Marvin never saw himself as a hero. Even with all the awards, all the sold-out shows, all the titles, he still saw himself as a father first, a man of God second, and an artist third. That humility is what kept him grounded, even when the spotlight got hot. And that's what made people stay connected to his journey, not just the music, but the man behind it. Destiny took an unexpected turn, and instead of crashing under the pressure, Marvin rose, again. Not with noise, but with peace. Not with announcements, but with quiet transformation. He had carried his family, his ministry, and his grief for years. And now, he was finally learning how to carry himself. So while the world still guesses about his love life, Marvin Sapp keeps living with purpose. His past was heavy, his losses were real, but his faith never wavered, and that's the story most people missed. It wasn't about a relationship rumor or a tabloid headline. It was about a man who lost everything and still chose to believe in joy, in healing, and in love again.